My name is George Bergstrom. I am the Southwest Regional Coordinator in the Professional Development Office of the Indiana State Library. With us today is Jennifer Taylor, who works at Hagerstown Public Library. Um, just a few reminders. In the lower left-hand corner, there are some tips on sound issues. If those are not helping you, you can certainly go ahead and type in the chat. But if it's a global sound issue, we will let you all know. And this is also being recorded, so if you are having sound issues and you can't get all of the content, the links will be sent out to the registration list, as well as the archived webinar will appear on the Professional Development Office's Continuing Education page on the Indiana State Library's website. I am going to just go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer. I want to thank you all, and as you have questions, just type them in the chat and I will get them to her either at the end or if there are breaks in the presentation. All right, thanks.
Thank you, George. My name is Jennifer Taylor, and I am presenting Heroic Adventure Kids Club, How We Made a Hat Club. This is a presentation that I originally gave as a session at Gen Con's Trade Day in 2019. It's been given a little bit of updating based on experiences over the past year. As they say, a lot can change in a year, and this past year was very eventful for this particular program that I run. And of course, the present stay-at-home order being in effect for Indiana means we haven't actually been able to run this program in several weeks, much to the disappointment of all of the kids involved, which they have all been sure to let me know through various means of communicating with me. But I have been able to point them towards a few other resources that are in theme to keep their fantasy and role-playing game interests fed, and I will share some of those with you in the course of this presentation. So my game plan for today is to briefly discuss what the Hat Club is, to briefly discuss the history of the game programming that I've done to the Hagerstown Public Library, and I will specify it's in Hagerstown, Indiana, so this is actually a very small town, and to discuss how the Hat Club came to be formed, and then how it has affected other programming in our library. A bit about me. As something of an explanation about who I am a second generation gamer who has been playing Dungeons and Dragons and a variety of other role playing games for about 35 plus years now. I'm a geek. I embrace it, I talk the talk, and I walk the walk. But I also believe that most librarians are predisposed to geeking about things, particularly if they are things that they are passionate about. Among the many things that I geek about, I am passionate about gaming in any form, but mostly board games and role playing games. And when we're passionate about something, we want to share it with others because we think that they could share that passion or come to share that passion. To give a little bit of background about how I became a gamer, I became very involved in gaming as a teenager with my parents' involvement and encouragement. My mom remarried, and my dad was a gamer. We played role playing games as a family to bond. We played once or twice a week, every evening, to help our new blended family become closer. My dad had been a Navy SEAL, and he picked up the hobby as a way to spend the downtime between missions with his team. And so when he got out of the Navy, he brought his hobby with him. The first time that I ever played Dungeons and Dragons, I was 12 years old, and my fellow player was my 9-year-old little brother. We learned to play Dungeons and Dragons together, and since Dungeons and Dragons is a great gateway game to many other systems, I've learned a lot of other things along the way. So, why Hat Club? So, Hat Club is basically organized chaos. I have a lot of different talking points going through to discuss this, and sometimes those talking points might make you stop and wonder just what the heck these have to do with a successful gaming group for elementary aged kids, but please trust that there is a method to my organized chaos. The Hat Club happened because ultimately my goal had been to have a strong group of high school Dungeons and Dragons players. Kids who would take up the mantle to teach younger kids and to share the hobby with others, not to mention to gain what I feel are benefits that come from being a tabletop gamer. If you're not familiar with what those benefits are, the benefits of role-playing games, which have been studied, are an improvement of social skills, academic skills, math especially, problem solving, creativity, and imagination, and it's also a great stress reliever. Some of the history known as my efforts to start a successful game-related program through the library from 2014 through 2016. It was a struggle. It was a struggle getting teen groups going. The biggest issue that I found trying to start up a teen-focused gaming group out of a small-town library was that while I might get one or two kids, and one of those kids was usually my own child, that for the most that for most of the teens in the community, there were just too many other things on their plate. Academic and athletic demands, jobs, family responsibility, all those things took a higher priority. A lot of them were interested. They would regularly tell me that they wished they had the time to come play it, but they weren't interested enough to make it a priority or to fit it into their schedule. I even made an effort to engage the school directly, to do things in the school that were game related, but I was having absolutely no luck engaging with the high school administration. I make mention of this in another webinar that I have given on quick play game programs that I now run through the local high school when we're not closed because of a pandemic. But I had scheduled and planned 3 separate gaming programs through the high school. All 3 of those were canceled, one of them literally the day before it was to begin, after I had publicized it happening, which just looks bad and was very discouraging and made me wonder if I was going to actually be able to engage the teenagers locally with programming that I wanted to share. I even attempted family game nights with a mix of success, but my hope had always been for a role playing game group to start. So I took a step back. I wasn't having any luck with the high school, and I considered the elementary school. I reached out to the administration and to teachers offering to run gaming programs there, but I didn't hear back from any of those. The person I did eventually hear back from was the newly hired community and schools representative who was looking for an out of the box way to work with kids who had anger management issues and to improve social skills and conflict resolution between some of the more at risk kids at the school. She reached out to me because I have past experience in social work and out of a hope that the library might have some resources to help her. And that gave me an idea. Specifically, I had just recently attended Gen Con with my kids and my husband, and my youngest child, who was getting ready to go into the 4th grade, play tested a game called Hero Kids. It was designed for 4 to 10-year-olds, but I proposed to her that we could play test it for a small group of kids with the right story and a bend towards teaching cooperative storytelling and role playing, that she could use it as a means of teaching social and communication skills that she wanted to demonstrate for those kids. The test kids would be a 5th grader and 3 4th graders who were invited to play. The kids played one session in October of 2016 and asked to keep playing. With permission to continue the program, the kids had 2 more sessions. By the time the 3rd session had finished in December of that year, they had declared themselves a gaming club and were bragging to their friends at school about it. And they came up with the name Heroic Adventure Kids Club, which was a play on the Hero Kids theme of the game that they'd been playing. And the acronym HACK Club, HAK Club, was a play on the hack and slash idea that many of them were entertained by. In January, when they met and played, we increased by 1. We had 5 kids. In February, there were 8 kids. By March, I began to regularly have 12 kids, and we ended up having to split and have two tables of players, with the older kids beginning to learn how to run the Hero Kids game system themselves for younger kids. Within a year, the kids wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, so we transitioned to that and began to teach them how to play that system. After another year, the group expanded and changed, and more systems have been introduced since then. Like any new program, there can be some growing pains, and we absolutely had growing pains. It was a benefit coming into this program being a gamer myself because I already had a lot of resources that I could use and take in, but there was still a budget that was going to be necessary. I began collecting available resources from every corner that I could think of. Besides the materials, space was also a consideration. During the first year with the group, we did all of our role-playing game hosting in one area of the library. Eventually, as the kids grew older, we split the party into two groups, a level 1 group and a level 2 group, which I'll explain more about later, and more kids came and joined us, and we realized that the younger group did better with a larger play area. So we moved that program to happen in a different area of the library where the chaos wouldn't be quite so disruptive to the rest of the library patrons and where they could spread out a little bit. The two pictures here, the first picture is our original gaming space, and then the second picture is the gaming space that we moved to this last year. The older kids still play in the first one. The younger kids have taken over what is essentially a large gaming table in our children's section. The change in space has allowed us to really focus on the difference between the level 1 group that is made up of 5th and 6th graders now and the level 2 group, which is made up of 7th and 8th graders. The younger group specifically focuses on how to learn to play characters, how to learn to role play. The characters that they are given are pre-generated characters. They get input into their character's race and their character's class, but the goal is to learn to play cooperatively and to play the character as it is on paper. There can be the occasional hurdle of learning to play the character as it is on paper because you occasionally have the kid who saw something really cool on TV or in a movie and they want their character to be able to do that and they want to play that, but that isn't possible with the stats of the character. And stats are the attributes, the skills, the powers that a character has. The older group, on the other hand, learned the mechanics of the role playing game system. They have learned different genres of the game and learned to make their own characters. So, summer reading has been a fantastic boost for this program because role playing games can literally fit into any summer reading theme. They can be superhero games, they can be science fiction and space games, and of course, Dungeons and Dragons is the pinnacle of a fantasy game. But there are literally thousands of role playing game settings and themes out there. And every summer, when there was a summer reading program, we gave the kids that were part of this group the opportunity to try a new system, to try playing something beyond the fantasy that they had learned to play in. And then we've also applied a Christmas or holiday themed game in the month of December. We try to run something that is that theme just because it can give them a memorable break from their regular adventuring. So these are the games that we've had the most successful experiences with. The Hero Kids was our first game, and that one works really, really well for younger kids. Although now, when we have the younger kids join, they want to just play Dungeons and Dragons, and I completely attribute that to Stranger Things. During last summer's summer reading program, we introduced the kids to Star Wars gaming to be in theme with the space programming that we were doing in the library. Another one that has been a lot of fun for the kids, especially the older kids, there's an old game system called Rifts. Rifts has been around for a very long time. Rifts is very crunchy and very complicated to play the original version of it. I played it for a long time and I love the theme and the setting, but it is not really conducive to teaching junior high kids how to play it. But there is a system called Savage Worlds, which has been given permission to use different themes and settings. They have a heroic setting. They have what is called Rippers, which is a kind of Jack the Ripper Victorian era game setting. And then they also were given permission by the Rifts creators to make a Rifts version of it. And the kids love the Rifts version of it, which is kind of post-apocalyptic mix of science fiction and fantasy. Finding the games for you, or more specifically for your players, can be as easy or as hard as you want to make it. So this is the part where I have a lot to share. Care and feeding of baby gamers is where I'm going to cover some of the administrative things about running this kind of a program, but also some tips to help your program be successful based on my own experience. Before I get into the fun tips, I'm going to cover a quick administrative thing. Personally, I recommend that the kids you have involved in any kind of role-playing game programming should have a signed permission slip from parents or guardians. I made sure to get these from the start, as well as a permission or exclusion statement to use video or photographs taken, because I grew up in a time when playing role-playing games was considered satanic. I know how some people perceive this hobby and believed from the start that the permission slip was for the protection of the library, myself, and the kids who participated to avoid any potential issue by addressing them from the start. As it happens, while the idea of being satanic or bad playing these games hasn't come up, there is something else that I have included in the permission slip that did come up and had to be addressed. My permission slip outlines the group's purpose, it provides my own contact information, and specifically lists what games might be played and advises that parents will be notified of any additions to the list should the kids request to play other games. The permission slip also outlines the code of conduct policy of the library must be adhered to, as well as outlining a fair play policy. Specifically, our games are cooperative, peer supportive, and we do not participate in player versus player at the age of our players. The permission slip is to be signed and dated by the parent or guardian and the child prior to the child participating in the sessions, but they are welcome to come and watch the games be played if they'd like to. The first couple of years that we ran Hack Club, we actually had audience people that would come and sit in outer areas where the gamers were playing, or even in another part of the library because they could still hear what was going on. My husband is very entertaining with voices, and he is my co-GM. And the kids really, really get into character, and it's very entertaining. So that's my big administrative note, though. On to the tips. Be flexible. Most of our GMing currently is done by my husband as a volunteer, like I mentioned, with me stepping to fill in if he has a work conflict or with my role otherwise being to wrangle and help learn the mechanics of playing without slowing down the overall adventure for the kids who have been around longer. It really is a two-person program if you're going to have more than 5 kids at your table. One thing that has been well learned over the last 4 years is that those kids in the course of being in character are going to come up with some of the most creative and unexpected story that you will have ever experienced. There is a meme that goes around on the internet. I don't know if anybody is a gamer, but it's kind of a joke about a father who runs a game for his elementary aged children, and the daughter, rather than fighting the animal creatures that he has come attack them, she instead befriends them. Well, we had a very similar thing in our game. One of the very first Dungeons and Dragons games that was run, we had the kids come across a group of people that they needed to spy on and they needed to get information from. We expected them to handle this themselves. Instead, they charmed a chicken and sent the chicken in for the chicken to listen to these people for several hours and then come back and report to them. So it was very entertaining to have a chicken spy. You have to expect that you might not get all the way through the story points that you plan when you plan the session out, even if you are certain that you'll have plenty of time. Our games run an hour and a half, and we tend to plan half an hour to 1 hour of story because the game is most certainly going to go off the rails with what we call a side quest, no matter what age group we're looking at. And be prepared for new players to show up at any time because inevitably the kids that are having fun will want to bring their friends who probably will have never played before but who want to try it out too. As a point of caution, and this is going back to my permission slip and the experience we've had over this last year, we had a boy who joined the game about a year ago. Over this last year, he invited 3 of his friends who he convinced to come and create characters that already existed as concepts within the game group. We try to spread out the variety so that everyone feels like they can contribute in a different way while still getting to choose to play something that they want to play. So we had 3 new players show up, all clamoring to play concepts that we already had because the person that invited them had conflicts with the players that were already in the group. And those players were playing characters that were not willing to just do what this particular boy wanted anytime he would try to give them direction. He was trying hard to direct their role play and thought that this was the best solution. He would bring his friends who would like to play with him and who would be willing to do just what he wanted them to do. This is something that we ended up needing to ask his mother to come in and talk to me about. It had also come up that this particular player had discovered what adventure we were using. Fifth, I'm sorry, fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons have standard adventures, and we were using just a standard adventure that's available to purchase. He figured out what we were running for the group and asked his parents to purchase a copy of it for him, which he did. He read the adventure, so he was prepared to make himself the hero by knowing ahead of time what was going to be coming up. Once we realized what was going on, that was something that there was also a conversation about. But it wasn't really something that we could enforce. We could just continue to do this without being obvious about it. I'm sorry, he could just continue to do this without being obvious about it, not mentioning, oh, hey, I knew that was going to happen and I was ready. Wasn't I clever? So instead, we looked into getting adventures that were personally generated for us by some friends. That goes back to the networking that I mentioned earlier, and I'll touch on that again here shortly. The other thing with the care and feeding, you have to provide tools, game books, dice, and dice trays. And I highly recommend dice trays because otherwise you end up with dice everywhere. And lastly, always feed your gamers. Gaming is a hobby that needs snacks. Not to mention that our games tend to take place immediately after school, and so giving them something to eat and drink tends to help them kind of sit and focus. They're hungry, and it keeps them on task. So resources. These are some resources that I have been able to take advantage of for what we do. Um, Drive Through Role Playing Drive Through RPGs is an online site where you can buy PDFs of gaming adventures and game books. You can also buy hard copies and sometimes some used copies of books. And so it's been a great source for getting gaming materials for these kids. Um, it's really hard to get a decently priced role playing game that is kind of obscure through book providers or through Amazon. And so getting them through Drive Through RPG tends to be where we go. Hero Forge Games is a game company that I met with a representative of while I was at Gen Con one year, and they actually donated a lot of game PDFs to our library so that we could use those for the kids. Fantasy Grounds is an online platform that is a means of doing online tabletop, but my husband uses it. He's actually a developer for it to give the kids a map that is visible and they have tokens so that they can see where they are and where they're moving and where the monsters are without having a map on the table and having those things like miniatures and stuff that's extra stuff to keep track of. And lastly, Hero Labs. Hero Labs is a resource that can be used to generate characters. They have got dozens of game systems. Um, I specifically have the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. There's also Pathfinder and World of Darkness and several other things. But if you reach out to the Hero Labs people, they actually set our library up with a free account of it on one device because, of course, they think if the kids learn to use it or adults use to learn to use it, then they will be interested and look at getting their own license for it. But those are some of the resources that I have been able to acquire and use. So what's next for our group? Stuff that is developed from the Hack Club. The biggest accomplishment that I have felt from this program is watching the kids who are still actively playing in the program branch out to form their own role-playing groups, and to come in the library filling a table with kids that have never played in Hack Club but are learning to play from the kids that we taught. One of those groups, which is run by an 8th grader, has been played every single Thursday as long as the library was open for 18 straight months. It was only disrupted by the COVID-19 shutdown. I have a couple of other groups that come in as well, more sporadically, once a month or once every 2 weeks. And I have parents who've reached out to tell me that their son or daughter has begun to run a home game for their siblings and parents at home. And I have English teachers that reach out and tell me all the time that they love to see and hear the stories that the kids recount at school for what their adventures were. There are a couple of kids that after they play the game, they journal what the game's story was and have kind of an ongoing game story. We've had an increase in kids coming into the library both for the Hack Club programming and other programming that's offered, and also on their own, like the startup D&D groups that happen on different days of the week. One of the goals that we had for this summer was to make videos of programming happening, videos of kids being in character to stream on the YouTube channel for the library. But I'm not sure how we're going to make that happen right now. We're still in the process of working out what our summer reading program is going to look like. And I've also had conversations with other libraries and other librarians, helping them set up role-playing groups and giving them pointers to learn different gaming systems. Right now, with the COVID-19 stay-at-home order affecting so many states, as I mentioned earlier, we're not having our face-to-face tabletop games. We have had every intention of gaming all through the summer, And because the kids that are currently in 8th grade will be moving to 9th grade, we had just begun to consider if we wanted to start up that high school gaming group that I originally wanted to have. And we were just beginning to discuss what that might look like. Um, and while there are resources and means of playing online tabletop games, Fantasy Grounds, the resource that I mentioned, would be a means for that. Most of the kids that participate in Hack Club are at elementary age, and I don't think that they all have the resources to do that. They would need to have a computer that would be able to run the program. They would need to have internet access, and it might make things more complicated than they're ready to deal with at their age. But I have given the parents recommendations of things that they can watch or do to continue learning more about the role-playing games that we play and to occupy their imaginations. One of those recommendations is to check out one of the many virtual tabletop games that get streamed on YouTube. My personal favorite is a series called Critical Role, but that is not always a kid-friendly series. It is an adult game. So I generally recommend that a parent who passes that one on to their child might want to watch an episode or two of it first, just to make sure that that is something that they are comfortable with their children watching. Some care, some don't. But there are some specifically kid-friendly game groups out there that you can watch live streamed. Maze Arcana, Sirens of the Realm is a great one. There's a group called the D20 Dames, which are 5 women that do role-playing games, and it's great. And then Fate and the Fable Maidens is also a good one. There are also lots of other lesser known games that get streamed onto YouTube by individual players or GMs that can be checked out. One of the very first things that I ever watched when we first began running the Hero Kids games, there are a number of fathers and mothers who recorded themselves playing Hero Kids with their small children. And it's very entertaining. It gives you an idea of what to expect and also some pointers of what might or might not go over well in your own library. So lastly, I can answer any questions anybody has. I will tell you the dice that we have in the picture. Last summer, I made arrangements with Chessex Dice to get um, personalized dice for the kids that are in Hat Club, and that's what those look like. Chessex is great to work with. It is a little bit pricey, but the kids really enjoy having dice that are specific to the club, and that's also a big draw. So, questions?
Okay. While Andrew is still typing and others are typing, we did have a question early on. Have you any experience with Monster of the Week?
I have not tried Monster of the Week game setting, no. It is one of the ones on my list that I have referred other libraries to, but I haven't tried that one myself.
All right. Well, it looks like we've got a couple of people typing.
Yeah, I am familiar with the book Little Wizards. It was one that I actually referenced when we first began Hat Club, and I was talking to the communities and schools representative.
Cool. Okay. Oh, here we go. Source of your dice. Oh, spell it. So go ahead and
Um,
spell Chessex for Charlene.
I think that it's spelled Chessex.
Yeah, that sounds right. But while you're tackling Andrew's question, I can look that up for you.
That would be delightful. Thankful. Thank you. Since I have my screen shared, I can't jump over to my internet. Let's see. Yeah, we weren't D&D initially with this younger group. Like I said, we played the Hero Kids system, but all of the kids had seen Stranger Things, and of course, all of them then wanted to play this game. Stranger Things, and then also The Big Bang Theory. We had a couple of kids that had seen that stuff and wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, and at the time, we thought that would be a fairly easy transition. The mechanics were much more complicated than Hero Kids, and we do have all the game books available in the library for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. We keep them as reference material so the kids can come in at any time. They can read the books. I have had three little boys that have literally read cover to cover the monster manuals. I don't know why that one really appeals to the boys. Um, and then branching it out to other genres, that just kind of came about depending on what the summer reading theme was. We took a game system that my husband and I, between us, we've played hundreds of different gaming systems, and they picked the one that they wanted to try.
So Hollis is a school librarian and is asking about resources that can be read to prepare a case for administrators.
Um, if in the next screen, I'm going to have my email there. I have actually got a list of resources I would be happy to email out.
Perfect. And then Andrew said, since you do this right after school, is there a day that seems to work best for your group?
My group meets on Mondays after school. That is the day of the week that I had programming in the library. We are a small library, like I said. In fact, we have 7 people on our whole staff. Um, I tend to run teen and adult programming, and so Monday was my normal programming day. But those programs for adults would be later in the day, so I would squeeze this in between after school and when my next one would start. But it has worked really well for most people in this community. There's things like scouts and Girl Scouts and 4-H meetings and things like that that sometimes can come into conflict, but most of those people meet later in the week. Sporting events and stuff like that, that could be a conflict. That's all later in the week, so Monday works best for us.
Okay, so Charlene, I did drop the link for Chessex in the chat. Hopefully you saw that, but now she's asking, um, she's not sure what resources are in her collection. Is there a starter list of gaming books that we should look into?
There are 2 box set starter kits for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons that are both great resources. Um, if you search for them on Amazon, they're pretty easy to find. There also is a starter set for a game system called Pathfinder that can be introduced to the kids. I have Savage Worlds books. I have Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. I have Pathfinder. And then we have PDF access to a number of other systems if the kids want to look at those. And some of the resources that I'll send out in my email does list some of those things too. Yeah, those are the kits. The question about have I considered an adult session? Um, yes, but I don't think, um, like you. mentioned with your question, the adults that have come in and expressed an interest to play have parameters. We were willing to run an adult gaming table, but the first time one man came in, he ended up leaving because my husband is a police officer and he couldn't be comfortable playing a game run by a police officer, which was kind of an odd thing. And I have found that some of the adults that come in, they have had their own personal experience playing whatever role-playing game that they are doing. It also means that they have quirks and their versions of the rules. Most of them want to play older versions of the game systems, and of course, Dungeons and Dragons is on its fifth edition. They've not tried fifth edition, but they played second edition, and then they get mad or frustrated that it's not that. So we go back to the second edition, and teen players aren't as familiar with it. So it can get kind of complicated. I have actually been able to give adult or older teen players who want us to run a game for just them and their buddies access to resources that would let them run their own online tabletop games.
All right. Are there any other questions?
So here is my contact information. My email is the best way to get in touch with me right now since most of the week I'm working from home. My sessions last an hour and a half. The sessions are scheduled to start at 3:30, and we always start the gaming at 3:30 on the dot, and then the gaming ends at 5 p.m. School gets out here locally a few minutes before 3, and the kids are always here immediately after. They get that half an hour to use the restroom, um, be able to return any library materials or check out library materials if they want to, and just kind of chill for about 30 minutes. But sometimes if they all show up early, we do start a little early.
Okay, I'll verbally answer Sarah as well. Yes, this was recorded. I will be sending the link out hopefully in the next week or two to everyone who registered, as well as it will go up on the State Library's Professional Development Office Continuing Ed archived webinar page. That's a mouthful. Uh,
I can appreciate
so,
the working from home with children.
yes.
At the moment, I'm only home with my teenage son, who's 13, but we also have a very large and loud dog, and I grounded them all in his bedroom, and they can't leave his bedroom until this is done.
Yeah. Okay. I please keep typing questions if you have them. I'm going to switch over to the LEU screen and remind everyone that up in the top box is the file for the LEU for this webinar. Go ahead and click on it, and then you should have the download file box should light up. And then my email is appearing at the very bottom of the screen as well. So I will be happy to field questions as well, or about other professional development opportunities, etc. To sort of state it one more time, yes, the webinar was recorded, and we will go ahead and send out the link as soon as I get everything transcribed and uploaded. So if there are any last questions, feel free to type them in. If not, I just want to thank Jennifer one more time and thank all of you for attending.
Thank you. If anybody has any questions that they think about after this is over with, you are welcome to email me